Welcome to the What Are Emotions and Can They Save Us podcast. G'day, I'm Marcus Lovett, producer and host of the documentary What Ate My Mum and Will It Eat Me? And this is the health podcast that goes beyond the environment, beyond our diet and exercise, and goes deep inside to explore the effect emotions have on our health. Today I'm talking with Dacher Keltner. He is Professor of Psychology at the University of California, where he directs the Social Interaction Lab. Dacher is a best-selling author with Born to be Good, The Science of a Meaningful Life, and co-authored Compassionate Instinct and Understanding Emotions. He consulted on the 2015 movie Inside Out and is the director of the Greater Good Science Center, which is a magnificent online resource for leading a happier and more compassionate life. He says the key to life are emotions, so I start with his definition of what they are.
So emotions in the scientific literature are brief, what we would call multi-component, which means they have an expression and a physiological component and an experiential component. Brief responses that are multi-component that help us respond to threats and opportunities in our social environment.
We are born with them. Are they evolutionary? Are they learned socially?
Well, there's a rich scientific literature on how, our emotions are really part of our evolution as a mammal and then a primate. So, emotional tendencies like anger and sympathy and disgust and laughter you can see in other mammals, and you can start to understand how there are indeed tendencies that we're born with that are part of our nervous system shaped by evolution. And then at the same time, what we learn from anthropologists and cultural psychologists is how much culture transforms emotions and changes them according to the culture's values and ideas about the self and morality. So they're both.
Where do they live? So where do emotions live? Are they in our mind? Are they in our body? Or are they in both?
Well, this is what's so hard to study about emotions and is really capturing where they are, right? So what we know is that emotions are in your brain, down in large part down in the regions below your cortex. We know that emotions are in your, what is called the peripheral nervous system, things like how your heart beats and whether you get goosebumps and whether your veins constrict or whether you blush or have stomach movements. Emotions trigger bodily responses, but then they're also in our awareness of our social environment. So when I become angry about, say, a political event in the United States, that emotion is part of how I feel that I'm fitting into my culture and my world. So they're outside of us as well. So emotions are both in the body, within the individual, and then they are part of how the individual situates him or herself in relationships with others. So they're very complicated to study because of that.
So really you're giving them three areas, like the brain, the body, and in the ether, like in another dimension almost.
Yeah, so, and that's really well put, Marcus. I mean, we, in Western thought, we tend to look inward to try to understand psychological phenomena. So oh my God, I have this powerful feeling of embarrassment and blushing, and it's all within my head. But more contemporary philosophy and some neuroscience of emotion is saying, look, emotions aren't inside the head, they are between people, right? They are, when I get embarrassed and blush and stammer and, do a certain facial expression that I've studied, I'm also thinking about myself as I relate to others. So emotions are very much patterns of social action.
Would you believe that emotions do affect our physical health?
Well, we know that, Marcus. So I'll just give you I'll give you three illustrative findings. So, what scientists have found is that, when you feel angry, let's say you're not paid fair wages or a rival takes your loved one or whatever it is, somebody insults you in the body. your blood pressure rises, and blood is distributed in certain ways to your hands, and other effects take place in your body that make you really ready to fight, right? And that's kind of the evolutionary heritage of that response, is the influences of anger upon your cardiovascular system are helping you get ready to fight. But if that feeling of anger persists for a long time, and your heart rate is firing, and your heart is working harder, and it's distributing blood in a more aggressive, assertive way, that actually, studies show, is costing you in terms of your physical health. Just wears down your heart. There's amazing new work on shame. And, when we feel ashamed, we feel defeated and submissive and small. And often studies show kind of it correlates with poor health profiles. And in fact, other studies are finding that when we feel ashamed, it activates a really important response, the inflammation response in your body, which is what happens when you have a fever and you're sick, and your body swells up to take care of toxins. And so what these studies suggest is that when we feel ashamed, we're activating sickness-related behavior and a sickness-related inflammation response, which, again, if that's chronically activated, is going to really cost you in terms of your body's health. Your immune system will be worn out. So there are a lot of really dramatic studies that tell us that the quality of our emotional lives, how we handle our emotions, has a direct effect upon physical health and longevity.
So is there lots of work being done on what they can do with their emotions to improve their health? So like you were just saying
Yes.
about shame and what it does.
Yes.
So then they go, okay, here's your problem. You need to work on, your shame.
Yeah, no, and the other place, sort of where this literature emerged to sort of just give people some ideas about how we can handle emotions effectively has to do with chronic stress and fear. And, you probably know this literature, but when we're chronically frightened and threatened and we feel like there's peril everywhere. So in the United States, 1 out of 5 people, 1 out of 6 people is in poverty. And they just feel chronically threatened. And they feel like food is uncertain and like electricity is uncertain. And they're just in a state of hyper-aroused fear. That likewise activates a stress response of elevated cortisol, and it damages your body, it damages your cells, it causes all kinds of health problems. And so what scientists have started to do is to take that knowledge and say, well, what are the ways that we can teach people to manage difficult emotions? So there's a really interesting literature on how we use language and storytelling and just writing about hard experiences as a way to improve our health. And studies find, for example, if I'm going through a really stressful time, but I just write about it, I get some distance from the experience and my health improves. The really impressive literature now on mindfulness, where you just learn techniques of breathing, calmness, not judging yourself, and looking upon your difficult circumstances from a bit of distance. It's the same thing where people who practice those techniques, they show reduced health problems. They handle stress better. Their immune system looks better. So we're taking the literature on emotion and health toward the study of things we can do to live a better life.
But also, like you were saying about that, if a society is more compassionate, the health of the society is better. So maybe even a practitioner, so a health practitioner, if they show compassion, is going to be helpful towards another person's emotions, instead of just all taking it on and blaming yourself and you've got to fix your own self. You can also help someone else.
Yeah, what a great insight, Marcus, and thanks for putting it that way. So my lab's been at Berkeley, the Berkeley Social Interaction Lab, has long been interested in the evolution and biological quality of compassion. And we've started to show with a few recent papers that when you feel compassion and you care for somebody suffering and you want to do something to assist them, it activates this part of your body called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is the largest bundle of nerves in the human nervous system. It starts in the spinal cord. The top of the spinal cord influences throat muscles, slows your heart rate down, deepens your breathing, helps with digestion. And there's an interesting literature showing that if I have a healthy vagus nerve function, and it's elevated, I handle stress better, my physical health is better, I handle trauma better, I feel better about life, I'm connected to other people. And we have shown now in probably about 10 separate studies that when I feel compassion, it activates the vagus nerve. And so there's this great idea.
So activates it in yourself or activates it in the other person?
It activates it in you. So when I encounter suffering and I want to do something, the vagus nerve is activated so that it helps parts of your body take care of other people. Like it helps you move your head so you can look at the person. It stimulates muscle movements in your throat so you can vocalize and communicate. Slows your heart rate so that you're not overwhelmed by stressful circumstances and you can act. So the great irony is exactly what you said, which is, with compassion, I actually become healthier. And there are other studies showing if I volunteer and help later in life and take care of people, I actually increase my life expectancy.
But could it go the other way too, that when you show compassion for someone else and they feel that empathy, does it help them as well?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that when we express compassion and we embrace a child who's crying, or we direct support and encouragement to our friends, or we pat a stranger on the back who's going through a hard time, those people do better as well. And there are interesting studies showing, for example, if I touch a person going through a stressful experience in a compassionate way and I just hold their hand, their physiology calms down, their stress response calms down. So yes, our expressions of compassion benefit others in the moment, but in a funny way, the long-term benefits of compassion may be most for the individual expressing it.
So describe a healthy emotional person.
Well, what we're learning, and we're starting to piece together the story to answer your question, Marcus. So I would say that a healthy emotional person has a fairly rich repertoire of positive emotions in their daily life. And they're laughing, and they are expressing gratitude, and they're having a couple times a week a feeling of awe about something that's amazing, and they feel love and connected. So there's a lot of those very, pro-social, socially engaged emotions like compassion and gratitude and awe and love. And then the second thing that I would say is that they have some perspective and balance when they get stressed out, so they know how to breathe effectively when they feel anxiety, or they know how to tell stories when they're feeling sadness, or they know how to reach out to others in effective ways when they're feeling solitude, loneliness. So how we look at it in the literature is the healthy emotional person has a nice complement of positive emotions, and then they kind of know how to handle the negative ones with these techniques we've been talking about.
Have you done much research with bibliotherapists?
I wrote this book called Understanding Emotions with Keith Oatley, and Keith is not only a cognitive scientist of emotion, but he's also a writer. And a novelist, a really successful novelist up in Canada. And Keith has this great chapter at the end of our book, Understanding Emotions, about narrative. And he makes the case, drawing upon these studies that show that when people tell the stories of our lives through therapy and through writing and through inquiry, they learn how to handle the stressful stuff, and they feel there's more meaning there for a lot of different reasons. And he makes the argument that we get that same health benefit and happiness benefit from reading fiction, that it's a way of getting perspective upon our problems, it has insights, it's aesthetically pleasing, and I think he's right.
Yeah, and also, as you said before, also from writing as well. So not just reading, but also writing and journal and keeping your own experience.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
You know, there's Louise Hay, and she associates physical stuff with a direct mental or emotional issue. Is there much research being done in that? Like, so if someone goes and has a physical problem, you go, well, we know what that is. That's because they've been angry too long or something like that.
Yeah.
Or it's not that clear cut.
Well, you know, I think one of the things that the emotion science has done is it lends credence to this kind of mind-body unification that's underlying your observation. You know, that wow, I'm really getting stressed out at work, and oh my God, I got ulcers and pains in my stomach whenever I'm around my boss, or I'm in a really difficult part of my marriage, and I'm finding that I'm getting sick more often. Kind of the classic mind-body connections that have been with us since Freud and before. And I think what we're learning from the emotion science is pretty clearly that there are pretty direct emotion to bodily symptoms associations that can be very problematic. So one of the one that I talked about is that just feeling excluded and submissive and rejected triggers this really problematic inflammation response in your body that we talked about earlier with respect to shame. And so if I'm in a society where I'm rejected or I'm stigmatized or I'm considered below, studies find I'll have an inflammation response and I'll feel like I have the flu and I feel like I'm sick and sluggish. And lo and behold, there are now studies linking poverty to those symptoms that are, associated with this inflammation response. And the emotion science is really helpful. It tells us that emotions and emotional conflicts are going to have direct effects on your body. And we should take those symptoms as really revelations about the person's emotional life, as Freud did and others after.
So what sort of daily practices could people do to improve that? So not specifically going after anything, I've got anger issues and work on anger, but just daily practices to cultivate emotional health. Well,
it's actually right at the heart of, I teach this human happiness class. There's a MOOC, a massive online class that I co-instruct called The Science of Happiness. And it really is about emotional health. And, so what I tell people or teach is this science that shows, just like gratitude, write 3 things down once a week that you're grateful for. Get outside once a week and look at something that's beautiful. Compassion. There is a rich tradition in all the ethical, spiritual traditions of kind of just take a moment, breathe deeply, and think direct, kind thoughts towards somebody you care about, right? Laughter. Figure out, your mode in which you're laughing, and whether it's tickling your kids or wordplay or a funny movie, build that into your life. And then I also teach, learn how to breathe really effectively. It's an amazing just deep breathing, deep patterns of exhalation, calms the stress response. Marcus, you really rightly engage storytelling, whether it's telling other people's stories, writing them down, is powerful and scientifically documented to lead to better emotional health. And I think, that I think people should look for some form of contemplation, quiet reflection. Could be in meditation, could be in yoga, could be in prayer, could be in just quiet. Just a minute a day, a couple minutes a day or more if you're better at it. I think, those 7 or 8 techniques will give you your best shot.
That's fantastic. And do you, if you had a major illness, let's say a doctor come up to you and said, you've got, a life-threatening illness.
Yeah.
What would be your first, I'm saying it's unlikely because after what you've just told me, you're probably doing all that every week. So, I'm thinking, well, you're not going to have it. But if you did, what would you do?
We always lose sight of it,
But what would be your first port of call?
Well, I love that question, Marcus. And, it's interesting. When I teach my undergraduates at Berkeley, and they're 18 or 19 years old, and they just, as bright and interesting as they are, they don't think like that, because they feel invincible and they're young and they don't, and everybody's living till they're 80 and they don't think about how precious the time is that we have here.
I was there once, I remember it.
I'm 54, and as you get older, you have some friends die, and and you do think like that. And this is why I ask that question of my students to set up this emotional health happiness literature, which is people have been thinking about this for a long time, and now there's this new science, and it tends to converge on similar stuff like, tell your story, go out and look at the sunset. Go breathe air near a flowering plant. Go and make sure you spend your time with people that really matter to you. Don't sweat the small stuff. So if someone told me that, I would make sure I get up. I see a lot of nature because that matters a lot to me. That I would make sure I prioritize my friends and family rather than making a little more money, or I would amp up my yoga practice and make sure I get good massages. What the health happiness literature tells us is there are like 12 or 15 things you can do that people have been writing about for a long time. We've talked about 8 or 9 of them here. Find the ones that are most important to you and do more of them.
It makes sense to me. I would definitely do that.
But it's so ironic because we know this. We've known this for a long time, and we let life get in the way. I will spend, 10 days without sort of thinking a grateful thought, and so we got to make it a practice.
How did you
Sure.
get into the research that you're doing now? What has fascinated you to pursue emotions?
Well, it's really this mixture of 2 things, and thanks for asking that. And the first is my parents, who were very influential on me, came out of the humanities. My mom was a literature professor, and my dad's an artist. And they were always just opening up the humanities to me, like a great scene from a Virginia Woolf novel or a painting of the Dutch masters with people at a dinner table. And I would look at those and hear about this as a little kid, and I was like, God, the key to life is emotion. It really is. And then the second thing is I got to work with Paul Ekman. And Paul Ekman, well-known pioneer in the study of facial expression, he developed this method for coding facial expressions with muscle-by-muscle codes. And I learned it. It takes about 100 hours to learn, and you start to look at people in such a new light. You just see the muscle by muscle unfolding of their lives. And it really became clear to me, like you could see how happy families were and also hear it in their voices. And then you could see where people were really suffering just in that scientific assessment of kind of the millisecond by millisecond unfolding of emotion. And that became the platform for my scientific career.
You worked on Inside Out?
Yeah.
How much did they use you? Like, did they use you a lot, or was it just the occasional phone call here and there?
Well, it's really weird. Like, I probably talked to them 7 or 8 times over the course of the 5 years of making the film. But the thing, that really has struck me, as I've seen it many times, and I was just on a panel last week with Pete Dacher down at Facebook, and what Pete did is he studied the science of emotion, and he read our textbook, and he, that I wrote with Keith Oatley, Understanding Emotion. He's like, let's figure out what the science says, and then we'll go from there. We'll ask Dacher more specific questions when we're stuck or when we need some kind of an outside perspective. And I feel like he used me very strategically, in terms of thinking about the benefits of emotions and sadness. And then he used the science very systematically. And in a way, Inside Out is it's just a statement about what we know scientifically about emotion. But it's
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great film.
Good.
Yeah. And you were, I'm guessing you would be like happy to be involved with that.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, I've been doing emotion science for 25 years. And most of the time I toil away in obscurity, and I have trouble expressing myself about what I study, and I can't quite define an emotion or tell you what they are, And here was a film that really, really, for a very large audience, said, this is what we know, and this is what they are. And I think for the most part, they got it right. So it was a profound privilege to be part of that film.
Dacher, thank you so much for your time.
You have been listening to a What Are Emotions and Can They Save Us podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I would like to thank my guests, for this would not be possible without the generous sharing of their time and knowledge.